Welcome back to the PI Files, where we dig into real cases, real people, and the role of private investigators in uncovering the truth. I'm your host, Eric Peterson. I'm a licensed private investigator here in California.
Everyone lies to a certain degree, and it's just trying to find out where the truth line is.
Today on the PI Files, I'm joined by Mike LaCorte. Mike's an international private investigator and CEO of Conflict International, operating across London, New York, and Dubai. With over 25 years of experience and investigations spanning more than 60 countries, Mike has worked the highest levels of this profession, advising corporations, law firms, and high net worth individuals around the world. Mike, I know you're busy operating globally, so I really appreciate you taking time to come on today. Number one, how did you get into investigations in the first place?
Well, Eric, first of all, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to come and speak to you. It's great to speak to other professionals in the industry, so I really appreciate the invitation. I've been in this industry for about 30 years now. Got a unique journey into this. I'm not ex-law enforcement, I'm not ex-military, I'm out and out private sector. And I immersed myself in the security world first and surrounded myself by, there was a couple of guys who were ex-special forces guys who were doing transition courses from people that were in the military and coming into the private sector. They were running courses, and a good close colleague of mine found this sort of transition course, and we jumped on it, and it opened up a world of intrigue, and I ended up getting into the industry that way. My first appointment was working as a resident security team for a Middle Eastern family. I was just part of a team doing sort of real patrols and whatever else, quite low level stuff. But I was in my early 20s, maybe 21, 22, and in part of this security team, there were a couple of expert type investigators that opened me up to this world, really, and I just got sucked into the investigation world. I joined the Association of British Investigators. I started to do continued professional learning, and done all types of the investigation world from a low level up, so from the ground up, doing sort of field inquiries, surveillance, lots of counter surveillance, lots of inquiries on the ground, process serving, statement taking, database work, and just ended up developing a career in private sector investigating.
Yeah, sometimes it doesn't make a difference with police experience or military, because obviously it depends on what you do in those respective industries. But a lot of times, some of the best investigators and security professionals I've worked with have just started like you did. And clearly what you've created is pretty darn amazing. And you're speaking all over the world, traveling all over the world, and extremely well respected. So how did you get from starting in that army to running the company that you have now?
That's a conversation over a few beers, Eric, but I'll try and minimize it and give you the sort of my sort of progression and journey. So I moved from security and went into investigation work, and was heavily involved in a lot of field work, a lot of surveillance work, and whatever else. And there's a thing called the circuit in the UK, where you are basically a subcontractor. And I was doing quite a lot of work on the circuit. I then became operations director for a company here in the UK who was conducting investigations, and I worked my way up in that field. And then, as with all sorts of self-employed small entities, you end up setting up your own thing and working that and building something from a small organization, small company, making connections in the industry, networking with the right people. I mean, I've worked with some of the most highly skilled investigators with, like you said earlier, a variety of backgrounds, whether it's law enforcement, military, intelligence, or whatever the case may be, and working and blending yourself in with these other guys who, many are a generation older than me, that I consider mentors in this industry. And then in 2008, I was working heavily with another guy called John Fawcett, and he had his own company. I had my own. We put our companies together. I would say, let's say a clever word for it is merged. However, there was no strategic merger. We just put all of our eggs in one basket. He would look after my clients when I went on holiday. I would do the same for him. We were working with each other so much over 10 years before that. There was like a natural transition. And then we created Conflict, and I got sucked into the international market. My father's Italian, my mother's Spanish. I speak both, and I was finding myself more and more accustomed to dealing with international overseas investigators. I had a knack for communicating with investigators from different jurisdictions and able to accommodate them when they had issues here, and forming relationships when I had issues overseas. I think the journey to growing Conflict was down to the World Association of Detectives. I ended up joining the board, running for the chair's for the president chairs. I was president, chairman for 3 years, and I've got a network of excellent investigators around the globe. And I fell into that international market. There's not many investigators that tackle the international industry. Many are busy enough in their own jurisdiction and where they live and operate. But we had a niche, and we would have the constant requirement to service our clients outside of our jurisdiction. Hey, Mike, I've got a case. It started in London, but there's an international element. Do you know anyone in Spain, or do you know anyone in the US? And we ended up continuously being in that sweet spot of being the experts to provide solutions outside of our own jurisdiction or alongside our jurisdiction. And then in 2016, we expanded to the US. I had a very good legal client based in the UK that opened offices in New York, and we were doing quite a lot of work for them. We thought we'll follow suit. So we contacted UKTI, which is a government body here called the UK Trade and Investment, and they assist in UK companies expanding overseas. And they opened the door for us with meetings, procedure, process. Ended up setting up in New York, took my license over there, which was, I mean, for a UK-based investigator, trying to understand American terminology, laws, processes, it's a whole study pack, but it's different. But anyway, went through that process and tried to expand in the US market, which, if you're not from the US, is challenging if you're an overseas investigator. So, and then we just ended up doing a lot of international work. Even today, I get people phone me up saying, Mike, who do you use in France? Who do you use in Singapore? You know, we ended up becoming the go-to knowledge base for an international network. And it's something I really enjoy, still love it to today. And that's why we're networked, you know, around the globe, get invited to speak regularly. And I've made so many good friends, not just business relationships in this industry, but real friends that I trust in different cities and jurisdictions around the globe because of the work that we do with the associations and with connecting with other professionals.
You had some great camaraderie, and I think that I've become kind of a go-to guy in California and for different states, but to establish what you've established is pretty darn amazing. And that's a lot of trust that you have to have with people. And there's been some UK companies that have wanted me to help them start up in California, and they haven't been able to. So the fact that you're able to, you know, operate in the US and do it's amazing. So credit to you. And yes, you're right. The US, each state is different, and there's different levels of, we'll say, standards and licensing. And then some of the laws are pretty much the same, but some of them are different. How do you compare worldwide the ease of operation, you know, US, Spain, UK?
Fantastic question, Eric. And I talk about international investigations all the time. It's my sort of subject expert topic. The biggest difference, and I put the US together and then I put rest of the world. American investigators, US-based investigators have access to a wealth of information. You guys have all of the data sets that we're not privileged enough to have over here in Europe, let's say, even the UK or Europe, you know, TLO, IDI, PACER, all of the detailed data sets that you have that give you very quick and very cheap access to lots and lots of data. When you come to Europe, we have the Data Protection Act, GDPR. I know that you have Privacy Shield coming in California and working its way from west to east. I understand that. But we're more restricted on the amount of consented data that there is for us to work with. And I have this constant battle with US and European investigators where there's access. You guys have a lot of access to information. I think probably the issue is too much access, and there's maybe some misinformation. There's errors, human errors potentially in the databases where it's manually entered, and sifting through the amount of data. Whereas in the UK, for example, you can't get someone's criminal records without consent. You know, vehicle license plate information you can only apply for it under certain criteria. It's not openly available. So, but where we're strong compared to the US, I would imagine, is the corporate financial data that we have here available. We can go on to what's called Companies House. It's free. That doesn't cost anything. You just need to know how to use it. And you will get all the submitted corporation accounts. You will get the accountants' names, maybe shareholders, advisors. There's a wealth of information on those filed documents if you know how to look. Whereas I know in the US, company corporation financial data is very restricted. So there's sort of balance of pros and cons. And I think the skilled investigator knows the jurisdiction that they're operating in, what's available, how to leverage that information, how to use it legally, and how to fill your client's objective. And that's where the skill comes into it. But you learn that, as you know, Eric, by conducting these investigations continuously, interacting with other seasoned professionals that don't cut ethical corners, and working those cases continuously because, these things change as well.
In terms of privacy laws and Jeeps, do you guys deal with a lot of that internationally in the UK, things like that? And how are they different?
You mean tracking, GPS tracking?
Yeah, so that and then surveillance. I mean, so out here, obviously you can't zoom in into somebody's window into their house. Certain states, you have to be a part owner of the car to have a Jeeps on there for like some of the family law cases or work, corporate cases. Are you utilizing those same different tools or is it a whole different ballgame?
There are those same tools. We use surveillance. There are certain criteria where GPS tracking can be used. What we would do with any case is we do what's called a DPIA, Data Protection Impact Assessment on the case. And we have to demonstrate that we're providing proportionate tools to the investigation. So to give you an example, if we're looking to conduct a trace, or if we're looking to find out whether someone is, let's say, meeting someone they shouldn't or working when they say they're sick, we would need to deploy proportionate investigation tools. Can this be done via the least intrusive method first? And then it's up to the investigator to prepare and plan how to execute that investigation. What you don't want to do is go completely over the top in terms of proportionality, intrusive surveillance, tracking, all of the things that you think, well, that's way over and above the tools that you need to achieve the objective. So the data privacy impact assessment is very important. You're documenting what you're doing, how you're doing it, and why. And then you're providing the proportionate investigation tools to satisfy the case. And that's how we would, prepare all of our cases. If you're doing excessive surveillance, for example, following someone continuously, then that could be deemed harassment, stalking, invasion of privacy. So you would need to do it proportionately.
Yeah, where it comes in, especially in the family law sector, if they have a restraining order or something like that, or a court order, then all bets are off there. But with respect to what you do, because obviously Southern California is pretty crazy with respect to, fraud cases and criminal cases and civil cases, as opposed to maybe Indiana or some other states. What in the UK are you getting some good volume? Obviously, it depends on, what's being filed and things like that and your requests from your clients. But what types of cases are you typically handling?
So I would say post COVID, we've seen a massive take in fraud cases. Fraud continues to be, I think, spiraling out of control. And there's a few components in that, Eric. One is the fact that we are now in a connected, ever connected world where you can be anyone, you can pretend to be anyone you want, and you can be wherever, in any location you want to be. And you can mask your identity. There are tools out there to mask your identity a lot easier. And there are also tools to enable fraudsters to attack numerous people at the same time. And we've seen a lot of people being, scammed, tricked, deceived to either invest, send, pay money, give, gift, and all of those types. That's one part of it. The second part is, and I'm seeing this with other investigators I speak around the globe, is law enforcement are becoming stretched in handling fraud matters. Not that they haven't got the skill sets or anything like that. It's manpower, resources, and priority in terms of severity of case. If they're dealing with, cases where there's safety at risk, where they're, maybe, murders or anything that's a lot more, I'm not going to say important because every case is important to the victim, but in the terms of scale, that resources are deployed on more urgent, serious matters. Fraud, the smaller frauds, especially in volume or fees or amounts that people have been scammed by, tend to get knocked down the pecking order. So the resources are not there. So we've seen as a private company, a lot more private clients coming to us saying, look, been scammed out of this, or this has happened, or this is my situation. Can you help? Those have been a huge uptake. And those cases, you can deploy a wide variety of investigative tools, not only the sort of open source database inquiry stuff, but also the field work, the statement taking, the interviews, the surveillance, and anything else that, is required to understand what happened and how.
With respect to, are you most of your clients individual companies or just a good mixture? And are you doing protection, close protection?
Sure. So we work for three client groups. One is the biggest part of our network is lawyers. So tier one, tier two law firms, doing litigation support and the variety of investigative services that lawyers require to protect their clients or to find or to prepare a case to, for court. Secondly is the corporations, and those again where sort of vary from consented pre-employment screening checks, tracing, in pre-investment stuff like M&A stuff, due diligence. And then the third group of clients are the family offices. And family offices are private individuals that have, say, a support network. Those are our three groups.
Got it. So when you look at throughout you've got this global view. What would you say maybe where the most fraud occurs, where the most, I mean, are you like, man, that country's crazy? Or is it just kind of even across the board?
It depends what we're working on. If we're looking to understand a corporate structure where someone's hidden assets, for example, very regularly similar jurisdictions crop up because the advisors use safe tax haven locations to try and set up a group structure to hide the UBO, the ultimate beneficial owner, from their asset or to distance themselves. Then, if you're talking about romance scams and pig butchering type cases, a lot of those are coming out of the Far East. They're compounds in Cambodia and the Far East where there's criminal networks that have set up actual compounds that are targeting the West, targeting Western individuals for a romance layered fraud to either develop a relationship with an individual over a period of time and get them to part with their money through a fictitious investment, a crypto opportunity, or even just sending money for all types of things like visas and false promises. So it really does depend on the case. It really, and those similar jurisdictions crop up with the types of cases that we're investigating.
What do you like to do? What kind of hypes you up and you're like, man, I love this. I love these types of cases.
Great question. The difficult cases for me are the ones that keep me up at night. And the ones that keep me up at night are anything with an emotional connection. And I know as a professional, we have to keep ourselves professional and detach ourselves from the client and the case. But there is always a case where if there's a missing child, for example, or some type of abuse, or someone that's vulnerable that's that we need to find some information on, or whatever the case may be, if there's an emotional connection, that those cases keep me up at night, rather than a transactional type fraud where a we're trying to trace down an asset because someone's got a judgment, or we're going through the investigative motion. That's still got value attached to it. They all have. But the emotional connection for me that's the one that keeps me up at night,
Yeah, same. Is there any one that stands out that you can talk about?
Yeah, I've got a few actually, and I don't want to. I mean, there's been a couple. I don't want to say too much to try and make the dots be connected externally. But we had a young adult who is a US-based student who was quite vulnerable, who went to Europe, who disappeared actually and went to Europe for a while. Family were concerned of his welfare, and we ended up finding him. And there were some real concerns for his safety, and we put some real robust measures in place and protected this individual through that process. And that tested our team to its limits, to be honest with you, Eric. And it was a case of all hands on deck 24/7. We were having strategic 3 or 4 people calls at between 3 and 5 a.m. and there were things going on that case where it consumed all of our resources just to make sure that the individual, one, was located, and secondly was kept safe during quite a distressing time for everyone involved. I'll leave it there in terms of going in a bit deeper, but those types of cases that get you where you are deploying every single tool and resource available to you. You are managing a client or clients that have real emotional distress, and you're working on a knife edge to make sure that the guys in the field are safe. I mean, you've been there, Eric, right? And every decision, step you take has real consequences, and you are battling on with all of these spinning plates just to make sure that the case is handled to the best possible way. You cannot take your finger off the pulse for a second. Those types of cases.
Yeah, I love those, but yeah, it's draining. And like you said, you're up in the middle of the night, and that you got to have a trusted team. So if something goes outside of the UK, how do you? I mean, obviously you got a great network, but you've definitely had to have some reps with these people to know that they are up to your standard and doing what they're supposed to do. So how do you keep track of all that, or it's just by getting to know people and working with them, right?
Well, that's one part of it. We do this thing called buddy up. So if I've got a project running in a different jurisdiction, we'd bring one of our own to go and run the operation. So we would be on the ground. I've got clients that will say, "Look, Mike, that's great. We're straight up. We say we have SLA, a service level agreement with a team in wherever. But if it's a client that knows us, they'd want one of us to go and run it. So we'd factor that in,
That's
and
good.
so we know the client knows that the deliverable is going to be the same standard regardless of where we are. Now, there are some operational differences in jurisdiction with what you can and can't do, but we would make sure that one of us is part of the team. We put some as many measures in place to protect the case and the client.
I love that. And then is there anyone that's any case that's gone kind of sideways or you've been like, man, or you just have that control and it works out?
So sideways, yeah, it does happen, Eric. We're not anyone that says to me, "I've never lost anyone," or "I've never," that doesn't happen. It happens to the best of us, right? But it's actions on when it does happen. What processes do you put in place when there's an issue? I think running the case is one thing. Managing the client and the client's expectations is another skill in itself. And if you cannot do that and you are over promising and under delivering, you're going to put yourself in a situation where your reputation will soon get the better of you. So it's understanding what you can and can't do and understanding the jurisdiction, managing your client and delivering what you say you're going to deliver. And that's difficult in the private sector.
That communication up front is so important. I always give clients examples. This is how we've done it before. This is what's happened, but this is what could happen.
Yep.
So I got to say, Mike, if I Google international private investigator, or put it in ChatGPT, I'm guessing you're going to come up with how you look and how you sound, just because that's you just fit that mold. You know what I mean? And you've got a bunch of experience. But what's interesting is like I said, if I Googled it, you would be the guy. So you're perfect for what you do. Are there any things that would surprise people about international investigations or operating globally?
Anything that would surprise people? Good question. I think from the outside in, the word international investigators got that meaning where you think, wow, that sounds pretty mysterious. What does that actually, what is an international investigator? And when I do my presentations on, what is an international investigator? That simple question, listening to some of the responses in the room, and if you break it right down, it's conducting an investigation outside of your jurisdiction. It's as simple as that. And those investigations could be anything from, the most basic of trace work right up to a full scale multi-man person team investigation. But, what would it surprise? I think that's probably it. People don't really fully understand what an international investigator is as compared to, say, a private investigator.
There's not many people, in my opinion, there's not many people that do what you do. I actually just saw something came up in my Instagram, like an ad, some guy I think he was in Arizona saying, "Oh, well, we handle all of this stuff internationally or nationally." And I'm like, unless I see all your license from each of the states, you don't. Whereas you're the real deal. You've got the network, you've nurtured that, you've done this and you started. But I think people don't realize that it takes a lot to do what you're doing. And it takes years and a lot of networking. And like we talked about earlier before this podcast, you're traveling more than you're at home and you're speaking and presenting and you have that huge network. Is there anything that you see through your travels, through your interactions that investigators are doing wrong right now?
So, yeah, there's a couple of bits with this. It's a great topic, Eric, and I love talking about this because, not one investigator knows everything, is an expert in everything. I think the challenge is the new guys coming through, and I say this in my office all the time, is they bring a new set of skills to the table where their technology skills are quite high, but they've lost that interaction, that human interaction, knowing how to speak to people, getting out on the ground and wanting to crack cases from their laptops, from their desks. The skills in the way, say, I learned, and I'm sure the same way you did, is being able to have the human element, being able to do those face-to-face meetings, being able to read someone, being able to make inquiries and speak to the little old lady at number 82 who knows every single car on that street. Those skills are starting to diminish. Map reading skills, everyone's got now maps on their phone. So the old school tradecraft that we had to learn because we had no alternative, I think those skills are diminishing. Whilst there are some good rapid solutions now with technology, I think you still need to master a combination of, traditional skills and new modern skills. Be an all-rounded investigator. And I keep saying that. Don't try and crack the case from your desk, because anyone can be whoever they want to be online. Get out there and make those field inquiries, because you'd be surprised what nuggets of information you'll find to complement the hours that you spent researching someone.
Yeah, and whether it's executive protection or investigations, it's always about the preparation, the advance, knowing the location, and think about it. What if your phone goes down? You better
Yep.
know those routes. You better know, as much as you can about patterns. And I agree. And then I think that bleeds into law enforcement with respect to detectives getting out and hitting the street and knocking on doors and things like that. Because I think people have gotten so used to making phone calls and being on the computer and trying to solve it by not standing up and going outside. And there's a point that you made earlier about the databases. While those databases are great, there's been times when I've gone out and because of human error for the data input, you've got somebody with the same name popping up at an address, and it wasn't the individual that we were looking for. And we had to confirm that by knocking on the door and talking to the individual. In addition, there's phone numbers that get, because we locate hundreds of people throughout the year, and phone numbers get intertwined, emails get intertwined. So you can't operate from behind the computer. You got to knock on doors and get out there.
Completely agreed. The amount of times I've said that in my office, I think the staff get bored of me saying that. But yes, definitely, I agree with you.
And like you said, reading people, finding that person, that neighbor, that you got to do it. We had one person, we couldn't find if this person was deceased, and lo and behold, the neighbor had the flyer from when they went to the service. So I mean, it was a pretty big case. And in terms of skills, what skills are essential for maybe the next generation of investigators or somebody who wants to operate at your level? Where do they start?
Yeah, so these skills are changing again dramatically, and I have these conversations with new guys coming in. It isn't just the one-dimensional background of law enforcement and military. I think anything in terms of being inquisitive, like journalism, that type of skill, understanding the banking and financial industry, that type of skill gives you an additional perspective. Cyber tools, technology, anything that gives you an interest and an edge. Never thinking enough is enough. Always looking past what you've found. So it's being, inquisitive to a point where you're questioning what you've found, and the ability to keep going and keep investigating, keep peeling those layers off, and having ethical and moral boundaries as well when you're doing what your work. It's quite difficult to train that. It's got to be instilled in you, and I think those are qualities that we look for. So it's when we interview now, Eric. What I agree with the background. That's one thing, but I like to meet the person face to face, sit down. And it doesn't have to. It's a different type of interview. I want to get to know who you are.
Yeah.
I want to get to know what you're bringing to the table. I want to get to know how you really think. And it doesn't have to be just in a work environment, because this isn't a job. Whoever says I'm going to be an investigator and work 9 to 5 is completely mythed by, this is a way of life. This is, you're always thinking about work. Some of my best light bulb moments have been when I've not been in my office and I've been out on a cycle or a run or away with my family, and I'm racking my brain on how to solve that case or why I can't connect these two dots. And all of a sudden it's there. So you have to subliminally be thinking about your work all the time. And not everybody can do that. The people that say, right, I'm shutting my comms and my emails off and taking a 2-week holiday, they're not coming to work at conflict. So, that's the difference.
Yeah, whether it's a cruise or Machu Picchu, I have to have internet, and I've gotten calls, and if the client's important, I'm gonna take it. So I noticed that you're creating an international investigations guide. Can you talk about that?
So this is you're talking about the ABI's GDPR code of conduct, right?
Whatever you're creating, I thought you were.
Okay,
Yeah,
two things. So, right. So I'm writing a book about how to conduct international investigations, which is
right.
the guide.
Yep.
God, that was inspired by me. I spoke on a panel in Orlando at an Intellinet conference with Kelly Riddle. I'm sure you know Kelly Riddle, right?
Yeah.
Oh, he's based in Texas, in San Antonio. He's a good friend of mine, very well known, very well respected in the industry. And he said, and we spoke about international investigations. I've spoken a few times. He said, you should write a book. And I was like, write a book? How am I going to do that? You know, he said, you should. You've got a lot of knowledge there and you could put it down on paper. So I started. Anyway, 2 years have passed, right? Whoever says they can write a book quickly has got no idea. Anyway, so I'm about 90% through it and I'm hoping that it's going to get launched this year. And I've seen a lot of investigators that come into the industry that want to tackle the investigation market, and even some of the most experienced guys out there. And it's how to think and how to prep yourself in tackling investigations in another jurisdiction. There's so much risk when you're playing in the middle. I talk about playing in the middle. And what does that mean? Where you've got a client who's got a requirement in a different jurisdiction. They come to you, you sub it out to a third party. You don't really understand what they're doing, why and how. And then you're marking it up and passing it to the client. You're playing in the middle, and that middle has got risk. And I talk about that, and I talk about what to think about when you're doing an international investigation, how to protect yourself, and how to maybe, create a successful career. It's been a lot of work, and that's the guide. I call it a guide. It's more, an international investigation book on how to conduct successful investigations.
You got to keep us posted on that because, there's really no, I don't know. It's not that I've seen. There's nothing like that what you're describing. There's no standard training, and that kind of bleeds into the protection world as well. There, you have these licensings, but they don't, maybe you take a test and maybe it's applicable, maybe it's not. Some states in the US, they don't even require a license. So anybody can do it. So they're flying by the seat of their pants if they don't take the initiative to educate themselves. So it's great that you're doing that. Now, I've got some rapid fire. So hardest country to operate in?
It's going to be, it depends. It depends, Eric. It depends on what type of case. Like the more monitored countries, for example, it depends what you're doing and why. But I would always get a local investigator to assist,
How about is there easiest country to operate in?
Your homegrown country, right?
Yeah. Do you prefer surveillance or intelligence?
So intelligence-led surveillance, really. If you do the intelligence correctly first, the surveillance exercise is easier.
Yeah. Biggest mistake investigators make?
Assuming.
Most valuable skill?
To listen.
One tool you can't live without?
In the investigation world, I suppose comms, really.
Yeah. What red flag in a client?
Not disclosing their identity.
How about green flag in a case?
You're frozen. You're back.
This one says green flag in a case. Maybe something, like something where you're like, okay, that's awesome. We got, something where you're like, this is
free information.
There you go. Love it.
Volunteer information when someone volunteers something.
Coffee or whiskey or beer?
We do this. We start with coffee. We then move on to beer and finish off with whiskey.
Love it. London, New York, or Dubai? What do you prefer?
London.
Well, Mike, thank you very much. This has been amazing. I really appreciate it. This is so insightful. Please come back when you put out that book. We want to hear about that. Promote it. For people that are listening, how can they get a hold of you guys?
So I'm always contactable. I like to have an open door policy. I don't know if you want my email address or phone number. We can put those on the screen or however you want. Yeah, no problem at all.
Yeah, thank you very much. This has been amazing. I'm glad you fit us into your schedule. I know you're busy, so thanks again.
Thanks, Eric. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, my friend, and I'll see you on the West Coast soon.
For sure.